Welcome to Lesson 7A, United States Budget Priorities. The categories of a financial budget indicate an individual or group's expense items. By analyzing the amount of money in each line item, you may be able to draw conclusions about, and I'm going to underline the word, priorities. Personal budgets can include items such as housing, rent, mortgage, utilities, food, clothing, entertainment, and education. In the previous assignment, you made a guess about the top three categories in the federal budget. Right after I read A and B, you need to hit pause and write these things down. Because if it were your choice, which three categories of all of these federal budget categories would you prioritize? Just your top three. And then write down the percentage of the overall budget that you think each of these should represent. And then just jot down a quick why. Take a minute to do this. In other words, hit pause, answer part 1, A and B, question 1, parts A and B, and I'll see you at the next question. In this lesson, you will understand that ratios can be represented by fractions or percentages. Percentages can be used to represent part to whole ratios. We will be able to determine percentages based on part to whole ratios. We can write them. We'll be able to explain them within context. We're going to be able to read a budget, determine the values of line items, and draw conclusions about overall distribution of funds. Now that you have listed your top three categories, let's look at the actual values of all the categories of the proposed United States federal budget. The pie graph shown represents the 2014 federal budget that was proposed by President Obama. We're going to look at this graph, and anytime you look at a graph, you should consider what you're seeing, the title, parts, picture, just to get an idea of what's going on the graph. I'm going to look at this chart and answer questions 2, 3, and 4, starting with question 2. Identify the actual top three budget categories shown in the pie graph. That would be the largest pieces of pie. These are the top three. Social Security, unemployment, labor, Medicare health, and military. Question 3 asks for you, or how do the categories on the pie graph align with what you predicted, and that are the actual top three categories from preview 7A. In other words, you did a prediction in preview. You also looked at some comments and some predictions on question 1. Just take a second to see, where are you? How did they align? How did they not align? And if you haven't already paused to do questions 2, 3, and 4, go ahead and hit pause right now, and I'll see you back at question 4. On question 4, it says the total United States federal budget for 2014 was this. It's a million, billion, trillion. So 3,777,807,000,000. Still looking at question number 4. Using the pie graph percentages, calculate the amount of money budgeted round to the nearest billion for the top three categories listed in the pie graph. So we'll start with the highest one, 33%. And on our calculator, we're going to punch in, to the best of our calculator's ability, the total budget times 33%. Then we're going to go back and do it times the 25%, and then times 17%. So you go ahead and complete all of part 4, questions A, B, and C. So question 4 is asking us to use the pie graph, calculate percentages, use percentages to calculate the actual money, and round it to the nearest billion for the top three categories. So I've written down the total budget amount, the 3 trillion, and I've already punched in 3,777,806,7 with 6 zeros, and I multiplied it times 33%. On my screen, I have this. And to round this to the nearest billion, if this is million and this is billion, let me change colors. Then I'm going to write it as 1,246 billion. We'll keep going with Medicare and health and with military. If you have not already completed B and C, please hit pause, and I'll see you back in just a second to finish these other two. I'm going to go ahead and punch in my calculator again, the total budget, and this time military is 25% of the budget. So I'm going to punch in 3,777, 807, 000, 000 times 0.25, and I get this number. Billion is 9 zeros. So I'm going to write our answer as 944 billion. The only thing, my 4, that 4 leaves that one alone, but I have a mistake. This 6 should be bumped up because of this 6. This should be 1,247 billion. I'm going to finish up down here on military. I'm going to take the same total budget and multiply it times the 17%. So in my calculator, here we go again with the 3,777, 807, 000 times, excuse me, 17 or 0.17 for 17%. And I'm getting this number, 642,227,190. This is millions, billions. And so this 4 is what we're rounding to. That's going to put us at 642 billion. So the numbers back here are the ones that we're going to carry on to some of our next questions. So go ahead and hit pause. You look at question 5, complete parts A through E, and then come back and we'll work on them together. I know we're dealing with some very large numbers, but I really like how this is leading us toward comparing part to part and putting budget in perspective. So in question 4, you calculated how much each of the top 3 categories represented out of the total budget. Now let's compare, not part out of the whole, but part to part. Write a ratio of the amount budgeted for military as compared to Social Security, unemployment, labor category. I like to write letters. That helps me to remember what it just asked me to do. And going back to grab the military money, it was 642 billion. And they want us to compare it to the Social Security number, which was 1,247 billion. And the nice thing about using a number-word combination is that this is a ratio, and we are done. Part B is going to take us a little further to say what common fraction is this close to. And so realizing that billions, 9 zeros, and another same billions, 9 zeros, we can just look at this as about 600 over about 1,200, which that's about 6 over 12. That's about 1 out of 2, or 1 over 2. So part B said, what kind of fraction is this close to? Well, it's close to 1/2. Part C, write a contextual sentence to explain what in the world is going on. And remember, we had military to the Social Security, unemployment, and labor category. A contextual sentence could be something along the lines, and I'm negligent on my dollar signs all through this question 4 and 5. I'll go ahead and put some here just to make me feel better. And right here, one thing it could be saying, or that you want to write, is that for every $1 we spend on the military in our budget, we spend $2 on Social Security, unemployment, and labor. That is one way to write this. Write it that way, or write something that you would like to explain differently or better, or that you would like to write. I'm moving on to part D. And so looking at part D, convert the ratio from part A or B to a percentage. And I'll go ahead and go with this nice little one right here. And when we convert that to a percentage, we get 50%. Part E, so what in the world does this percentage mean in this situation? And remember, it's the military as written compared to the reference value of Social Security, unemployment, and labor category. And it means that the money budgeted for military is about 50% of the money budgeted for Social Security, unemployment, and labor. Question 6, what are your observations about the distribution of funds into the categories of the federal budget? What do you conclude about the priorities of government spending? And when we've had these discussions in class, it is interesting what we perceive the budget is for the nation and what it really is, and then what it really looks like when you get down to the nitty-gritty and start comparing. Because in our class, we've had some pretty deep discussions about too much money being spent on military. And then when you get it in perspective here, that just $1 for military for every $2 on Social Security, it puts it in a different perspective. So on this question number 6, write down what you're observing. It may be you're upset right now, it may be you're aghast right now, and maybe it's exactly what you expected. But write down a couple of thoughts on question 6 about what are your observations. This concludes lesson 7A. Look at your calendar to see if there are more lessons that are due this week. If there are more due, let's keep going on the lessons, the videos. If not, stop and do your homework.